Good morning, Fayetteville. I want to welcome you to the Millennial Morning Brew, and we have my guest host, Nick Brothers, and my guest speaker, Miss Sarah Marsh. First of all, we wanted to say why we're doing it, this show, and where we are. We're at Puritan Brew. It's a place where millennials like to frequent, so we feel like we had to come here to gauge the perception of young people during this really interesting presidential cycle. And the reason why we chose to do this is because we wanted to just kind of shine a light and give a voice to people who don't necessarily have a voice. And the way we start to show off is we have a term or something that's associated with the current presidential election, and our term today is called social polarization. And I'll read that off to you so you know what that is. Social polarization is associated with the segregation within a society that may emerge from income inequality, real estate fluctuations, economic displacements, etc., and result in social differentiation that will consist of various social groups from high income to low income. So basically, it's the segmented portions of populations that sometimes doesn't get noticed. So I'm gonna kick it to my co-host Nick Brothers and see what he thinks about this term, and we'll just get started.
Yeah, well, good morning, Carl. Thanks for having me, and thanks so much, Sarah Marsh, for being on the show. Appreciate it. Thank you. So, yeah, this is something I think that becomes more and more illuminated. One, as you get older and the more you kind of see of the world, and it's also, I think, clear as day when it comes to politics. There's definitely I think there's two different worlds. You know, when you're viewing life from the top, let's say if you're a social elite, working an executive level job, or making as much as six figures, just as as an example. I think just what maybe your concerns would be different than a person who would be making 20,000 or less. They're just completely different. What your values would be maybe, and what you're concerned about. I think also too, it's just completely different worlds, and it leads to a lot of different ways of seeing it. I'm kind of running out of steam already, but it's the first round. Right. Well, I mean, bounce back to you, man.
So no, I'm gonna kick it to Miss Sarah Marsh and see what she thinks about this term, and kind of gauge her perception on that.
I think it's a really important term for us to be discussing. I've experienced both sides of the spectrum. I used to have a big six-figure executive job in Seattle, and then the recession hit and I lost everything. And now I live in Arkansas, and I am near the poverty level, and it's definitely changed my perspective. And I don't know that it's changed my values, because I've always been a person who has had a lot of empathy for people in different situations. But as far as the polarization, I live down in South Fayetteville and Fayette Junction, and south of MLK, average household incomes in Fayetteville are less than $25,000 a year. We've got 1 in 3 kids experiencing food insecurity, and 1 in 4 adults experiencing food insecurity. And so their reality of our community is very different from someone who is, has a good salary, is in a more stable position, is not worried about where their next meal is going to come from, and has more flexibility in their life. So I think that it's important as a community that we integrate, especially across that socioeconomic spectrum, and understand that, we're all human, we all share, we love our families and our friends, and we all have things that we can contribute to our community, and that I really would posit that we can judge the economic health of our community by the economic health of the least of us in our community, and Fayetteville needs to be doing a better job at addressing those needs.
Absolutely. That's a great point that you make, is your chain link is only as strong as your weakest link, and I think that is hugely important when people don't have a voice necessarily. And when I say a voice, is the financial fortitude to push that agenda. I think that's what proves to be people get unnoticed, and they get more and more deteriorated, the quality of living. Like you said, in South Fayetteville, the average median income is less than $25,000. I mean, if you look at Fayetteville as a number 2 best places to live, and a lot of major major magazines across the world, this country, which I just read not too long ago, and I was listening on NPR, it's like you want to live here, but we also got to keep in mind the people that have been living here, but been living here at a certain level. And once new business come, new things come, those levels tend to go up, like we talked about gentrification last week. So social polarity is always kind of a conundrum that cities have to face and have to figure out how to segmentate their appropriate their resources to the best way that they can. That way everybody is involved. And I think for us, and that's one of the reasons why we chose to do this show, and one of the reasons I choose to volunteer, and Nick and you yourself, and you always going to find out more information on the ground with the people and understanding what they go through versus talking from a birch or from a tree and having that six-figure income and, hey, you just need to get a better job. It's just not that easy, right? It's really not that easy, and people really don't understand it coming from a place when you don't really feel what those people are going to. Do you have any more thoughts on that?
Yeah, actually, I just kind of want to jump on kind of what you're saying there, is that I think you're kind of led me to think about how easy it is to kind of get wrapped up in your own personal world. Maybe kind of just this word exactly. It could be your job, it could be your where you live, anything, your community, and maybe that kind of gives you a certain tint of glass of how you see the world, and you can continue to live in it, and that's how you can kind of be disconnected from how other people live their lives, right. And or whatever. And I think that can lead to a lot of strife between people if they just feel like like us versus them kind of rhetoric and mentality, right. And it's really unfortunate because it's all like a construct,
right.
You know, yeah,
right.
It's just how you're perceiving it,
right.
And I know I wish I think it just comes down to conversations, you know, if people had more opportunities to be around each other and be able to communicate.
Exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, that's really all I wanted to add. Okay.
Sarah, did you have anything you wanted to add more to that?
Well, I would just say that from a city perspective, I think one of the benefits of public transit is that it brings people from disparate income groups or social groups together, and that's something that I would really like to see Fayetteville improve at. You know, as far as, on one hand, you've got people commuting to Bentonville for their executive jobs, but you've also got people going there to the Northwest Arkansas Community College trying to improve themselves. And then if in the city we had more opportunities for people to take public transit, it's a great place for people to encounter people that are different from them that you don't get when you're sitting in your single occupancy automobile on the I-49. So I think that there are some things that as a community we can do better that serves a broad spectrum of our society and helps us engage one another and be full participants in civic life.
Absolutely. And I'm not sure how much longer we got on this segment, but the social polarity, it's not only just from a social standpoint of living from a jurisdiction standpoint or from a different locale. It has different implications, and also from a gender standpoint, and one of the reasons why, you know, we wanted to bring you on because you're female, we wanted to see perspective as well from that polarity standpoint. How do you feel social-wise that the woman's message has been going in the agenda? How is it from a political standpoint, and what do you feel like that, how does this word relate to that?
Well, as one of the few women in government, in fact, in Arkansas, I believe 1.7% of our elected officials are women. So if you look at gender equality in political representation in Arkansas, we actually score an F, and we have one of the lowest representation rates in the country. And as a result, we see we have the second highest rate of unplanned pregnancy. We have one of the highest rates of women living in poverty. We thankfully don't have as high of a rate of wage disparity between men and women because unfortunately a huge portion of our workforce is at minimum wage. And so you can't underpay women when you're already paying men minimum wage. But many times in public meetings, I am the only woman, especially in Water, Sewer, Solid Waste Committee. And you know, I am from a traditionally male academic background. I got my degree in architecture, you know, and I've spent a lot of time working with men on construction sites. And, you know, I didn't seem to have much problem with that in the Pacific Northwest, but when I moved back to Arkansas, the sexism that I encountered was enough to really drive me out of the profession for good. But we need more women in public office. We need more women in leadership roles. And I'm really glad that this election has brought up sexual discrimination as a topic. And, hearing the stories that women are talking about with Trump, they're common experiences that I've experienced with men all my life, and I think a lot of women in this community feel the same way. I think that the majority of women that I know have experienced sexual assault. And when you think about having to live in fear your entire life and having to, I would love to go for a walk every morning on our trail system, but I'm not going to go alone. Right. And you think how that might impact the long-term implications of that on my personal health. So we have a long way to go to achieve full gender equality, but we're going to make progress and we're going to keep working until we get there.
Right. So, and that's a good point. I think that the ideology of what you were referencing as far as the Trump comments is, and some people are coining that as, locker room talking, and it really is not. And I'm, for one, I have a daughter, and we have families. Nick got a mom, grandmother, aunt. We all have these things. It's like, I'm not gonna disrespect my mom or watch somebody disrespect somebody I love to that degree. But just because she's a female, and some of these people are just, hey, I'm still gonna vote for them, and they are. And the reason why that is, I think, is the undertone of society that accepts the man's behavior towards women, and that is not in the most best consensual proportion of society. It's just like, I'm gonna say what I want because I make seven figures, or I do this. I can do what I want. And what you're
kind of what he said, yeah.
Right? Exactly what he said. So, and what you're alluding to is like guys that don't make nearly as much as Trump. They're still partaking in that same ideology, and that ideology, if you really be honest with you, is just, how are they raised? But how is society kind of perpetuating, whether it be TV and media, they're perpetuating a certain reaction and condition. Like, these children are getting conditioned to treat women a certain way, and women are getting conditioned to look a certain way, which is like you put you in a box, right? And it shouldn't be that way. And that's just kind of those are the issues, I think, and that's polarization. I think the polarization is how much you've dealt with it and not having to have a voice to speak about it. And you're just one person that's in public office that do have a platform. But think about the millions of women who don't have a platform. So, and I think we're about wrapped up on this segment. So, social polarization really it's transcendent. I think it can be attributed to a lot of different things in society, whether it become gender equality, whether it become education equality, whether it is financial equality, or just the breadth of where the social interaction is. Because it's an apparatus. It's different things, moving parts, and whenever you got people dealing with each other. So everybody, the genders clash, whether you're talking about the minorities, minority women, or women are minorities. So it's one of those deals that I wanted to bring this to a light, and I felt like, and looking at some of your key things that you on your platform, on your party, I kind of researched you a little bit. I felt like this was an appropriate topic to discuss. And Nick, did you have anything to add before we move to the second segment?
I have a question, though. Do you think social polarization is inevitable?
Well, I think it's kind of like that thing with the inflation deal, where you have some inflation is good inflation when you talk about economics. But yes, I think it's always going to be existent, but it's how much, right? How much can we keep it down? How much can we stave it off? And is it appropriated amongst the people that it's important that everybody has acknowledgement and has a voice to speak? But some form of social polarization is inevitable, and it's unfortunate, but it doesn't have to be derogative, right? It could be, okay, we know that these things are happening, but we're addressing them. We're proactively, as a city, we're determined in identifying these things and trying to execute plans of action towards these particular things that come up when they talk about gentrification or social polarity. So that's it for segment one. Our next segment, when we come back, ladies and gentlemen, will be our interview with Miss Sarah Marsh. Thank you. Welcome back to Millennial Morning Brew, and this our segment 2, and we're interviewing Miss Sarah Marsh, who is actually on City Council right now in Ward 1, C2, and she's running again. So our first question, in your opinion, what is the overall vision for Fayetteville?
Well, thank you for having me on. I want to live in a great city. And our citizens laid out a fantastic vision for city growth in the 2030 city plan. That was a process where we invited the citizens in to come and tell us, what makes a successful community and how do you want to see Fayetteville grow. And they talked about making appropriate infill our highest priority. So, not so much suburban sprawl. Let's build in our core city and let's use our growth to help us make a walkable city. They talked about the importance of having an enduring green network, which is basically, protecting our natural places, our streams and mountainsides, and, protecting our trees. We're a Tree City USA in Fayetteville, and we want to be a beautiful place to live with a healthy environment. We talked about growing a livable transportation network. I lived without a car for 12 years before I moved here and actually had to buy a car to live in Fayetteville. That was like a tax for moving to Fayetteville. And it's been a really difficult thing to maintain. In fact, we interviewed a lot of people experiencing homelessness down on the south side, and for the men, the number one contributing factor to becoming homeless was losing reliable transportation in order to get to work. So we've got to do better at connecting the places where people live to the places that they work. And I think we need a healthier economy that better serves everyone in our community. We need to do better with living wages and making this a place with a great quality of life so that we can retain the graduates of our university and attract the best and brightest workforce to help us attract great employers, but most importantly, to grow our own local independent businesses. So we're going to be doing a lot of economic development activity in the next 4 years if you'll reelect me.
Awesome. That's a great response. And just to what I gathered out of your response was basically the diversity of the portfolio of the city's vision and the inclusiveness, making sure that everybody is a part of that vision and the infrastructure that will bring jobs, right? Mm-hmm. So, as any part of any city that has aspirations to, especially with a 2030 plan, I know they send people to Copenhagen to figure out, to see their infrastructure. I had inside news on that, so everybody will know about that. But it's it just shows you the extremes that the city is willing to take to make sure that they are bringing in not only a regional but a national and a world vision to make sure that they are doing everything that they can to make this the best city. And I never really thought about the reason why males would lose their job, but it makes sense if they don't have adequate transportation. Mm-hmm. It would lend itself to having issues with being able to get to work on time. Mm-hmm. And so, Nick, do you have something you want to ask?
Totally. Well, I think it'd be good to one, ask you about Ward 1, kind of what that entails and what it encapsulates, and then specifically, what's maybe one thing you want to do if reelected that you'd like to see improved?
Well, Ward 1 is actually the largest ward in the city, and it encompasses most of the south side. We go all the way from the eastern boundary to the western boundary and, of course, the southern boundary, and then we come up and we hug downtown along MLK and Archibald Yell Boulevard. The boundary line goes up to East Dixon Street, is that Mission, I believe, there, and over to Rockwood Trail. So if you're south of Rockwood, you're probably in Ward 1. As far as improvements, Ward 1 has some of the oldest infrastructure in the city. In fact, historically, the Walker Park Jennings addition, that was historically the low-income minority neighborhood, and as such, it has suffered from a lot of disinvestment, especially in the 50s and 60s era. There are still streets down there that don't have sewer lines. We have inadequate drains and sidewalks, and so we definitely need some transportation improvements down there in terms of sidewalks, street improvements. I know the intersection at 15th and South College, almost every day there's a semi-truck wedged in that intersection trying to get to our Commerce District, which employs over 3,000 people every day go to work in that Commerce District. So we need to rework that intersection, and we need to do a lot of work on South School in particular to revitalize that business district. I started an organization called Energize Southside, and we've been working with Main Street Arkansas to help figure out ways to revitalize and really empower that neighborhood, not gentrify it, but empower those citizens to improve their neighborhood, and let's bring some more investment down there. We've got the research and technology park down there, which is a great hub of technology incubation companies, a lot of high-wage jobs and great opportunities down there, but we need to better connect it to the people who live in that neighborhood and to the services that are available for those workers.
That's a great response, and and I've been down there, and as farther you go, and I'm guessing that with the accumulation of business in on the square and in places where you got a lot of business, especially when you go up to Bentonville, in that area, would you say what would be the direct reason why the development hasn't reached that area, and how long do you foresee the city really deliberately focusing on South Archibald Yale and farther South Fayetteville towards the jail, that area down there? So I guess that's what my question is what do you think they need to do?
Well, our Fayetteville First Plan, which is our new economic development master plan, really emphasizes revitalizing that 71 business corridor, which includes South School, and connecting to the research and technology park, and really having a more formalized relationship with that aspect of our university. Unfortunately, I can't unilaterally fund the sidewalk improvements that need to happen down there. I really need another ally on the council to help drive those initiatives through. And also we have the obstacle of 71 business or South School Avenue and Archibald Yale. Those are state highways, and we've had a terrible time working with the State Highway and Transportation Department in order to get them to include alternative forms of transportation. They're not amenable to us putting sidewalks, bus stops. They absolutely refuse to do a crosswalk at Archibald Yale Boulevard, which would connect, the kids in Jennings Addition to be able to walk up to Washington Elementary School. So we have some obstacles to overcome with state departments, and I think that's why that area has really languished, and a lot of it has just been a reputation issue. But as far as development, we're seeing a lot of exciting housing development happening in the Walker Park area, a lot of small infill development, which is what we want to see as a community. We're seeing the fourplexes, the accessory dwelling units, which are like the garage apartments, small townhouses, and a bigger variety of housing than we're seeing in the rest of the city. And because this is infill development, it's, we're not seeing new subdivisions pop up. Right. We're seeing, it house by house by house in neighborhoods, which is a really healthy development trend. Our commerce district is thriving. We need more land to accommodate larger industrial clients. And we've preemptively rezoned South School Avenue to our form-based codes so that when it is built out, the buildings will come up to the street. They will face the street. The parking will be in the back or the rear because we want to make it a place for people instead of cars.
Right. Do you have anything else that you wanted to ask on that, Nick?
No, I mean, that was a good answer.
But yeah. I guess before we go to the next question, just to go back to what you were saying as far as South Fayetteville, it almost, to me, is they need to have jobs, right? And I think that area, so if it were me and I had a magic wand and I could change everything, we have to include those people in the forms of alternative energy like solar, wind. We have room for those things, and I think the infrastructure of this city is going to lend itself to have more of those in its portfolio when it comes to energy. And I think that and also building roads and things of that nature if you give those people that live in that area those jobs, I think you'll start to see more of a better development. And if it's deliberately focusing on the jobs and education, because the only education, from my standpoint over there, you have the GED Center that's right there on the corner of Jefferson, yeah, right, and the Senior Citizen Center. And not that these people don't go and get educated, but you got to think that the medium, income is less than $25,000. So you got to attribute that to the lack of education, right?
Not
necessarily, but it's one thing that the people that are there are older, right? So it's not necessarily that they don't have education, but the opportunity to get education is maybe a little bit more limited because you have veterans, you have people that are homeless, you got people that deal with mental issues. I'll play basketball down there a lot, so I see a lot of. I was there last night, so I see a lot of the individuals that are around there, and it's almost like they need those jobs and some type of form of training, whether it be on hands training to be able to raise their living wages. And I think that's an issue. The biggest issue to me is just don't have the lack of resources to be able to enhance that area for the people versus the infrastructure coming in and just doing it all, but you still got a base of people that just aren't able to afford everything. Right. So, and I think that's my opinion, I guess, when it comes to South Fayetteville. So we're going to go to the next question for Ms. Sarah. So how diverse has the NWA region become, and how do you think that diversity will improve the region as a whole?
Well, I actually don't have the statistics on how diverse we've become, but I do know that we've become a lot more accepting of diversity thanks to our, we recently had our civil rights issue that passed. Yeah, so, that issue, it's been settled by the council, it's been settled by the voters, it's been settled by the courts, and Fayetteville will not discriminate. So, I think that was a big step forward. And I do know that Northwest Arkansas has recently been named a top place for African American women in business. So I think that is something that's good. And actually, I recently read that African American women as a group are the most educated group. Population group in our country right now, which I think is fantastic. But I think it also contradicts the idea that people are not getting paid as much because they're not as educated. I think it's important that we realize that there are a lot of overeducated or underemployed people in South Fayetteville. But I think diversity is great for our region, even especially culturally. We just had the new radio station KDIV. That has helped my life immensely, improve the quality. Just because before it seemed like everybody was into banjos and pop music, and hey, we've got hip hop now. Right. And I like living in a community where people are different from me. I think the LGBTQ group have done great things to advance women's equality and, shattering kind of what was traditionally, very segregated gender roles. And now when you see families with, two fathers or two mothers doing a great job raising their kid, it's suddenly raising a child is no longer just a woman's job, but it's something that, parents can do. So I think that by looking at whether it's different faith traditions or cultural traditions, there's great things that we can learn and enrich our lives from that. So I'm glad to see that more diverse groups are coming to Northwest Arkansas.
Absolutely. Nick, did you have anything on diversity?
I'm trying to think the kind of
our question
follow-up question. I'll think about it. Do you have one?
Not necessarily. Yeah. So what we're going to do, I don't know how much longer we got on this segment. What we're going to do is kind of lead up into the quote of the day eventually. I think Nick has a question.
Yeah. I think you just needed to incubate for a little bit.
You go.
Yeah, well, maybe kind of more of a fun one, but I'm interested to know maybe what inspired you to run in the first place and get involved in the city.
Well, I wanted to live in a great city. And with a background in architecture and community planning, I know that those things just don't happen by accident. They take a lot of hard work and strategic planning. And having moved here and really not felt comfortable in the architecture industry, which was my industry, I was looking for a new way to apply my skill set and do meaningful work. And the city is great. A lot of the core functions of the city are providing, making sure that your trash gets picked up and that we have, that we're recycling. It's about making sure that when you turn on the tap, you've got clean drinking water, and when you flush the toilet, your sewage goes away and gets treated before it's dumped into our creeks. It's about protecting our watershed, managing our growth, and being an advocate for our people, which is something that I have strengths in all of those areas. My opponent doesn't. And he's running on a platform of discrimination and really kind of just some political talking points without that in-depth technical knowledge, whereas I used to be a senior project manager at a mechanical, electrical, and plumbing engineering company that focused on high-performance buildings. And, you mentioned energy efficiency earlier, and since I've been elected, we started the first energy improvement district in the state in Fayetteville, and it's been so successful that Springdale actually joined us under the pressure of their Chamber of Commerce, ironically enough. And so we're offering low interest, long-term financing for energy improvements, renewable energy and water improvements. And we've also been getting our own ship in order, and we've managed to shave $14,000 a year off in utility costs. So we're saving that. And the investment in that project, it's about a 4-year payback period. So that was a good value for the city. There was a recent study that showed for every dollar that Northwest Arkansas residents spend on energy, 97 cents leaves our state. So when we leak energy or we're inefficient in our energy use, our economy is hemorrhaging. So we need to get energy efficient and keep those local dollars in our economy.
Awesome. So I think that's going to wrap up the segment 2. We're going to go to the next segment. I'm going to bring you the quote of the day, and we'll be back. Welcome back to Millennial Morning Brew with my guest, Sarah Marsh, and my host, Nick Brothers. We're going to read the quote of the day for you in our segment 3. And here it goes. You have never really lived until you have done something for someone who can never repay you. Mother Teresa. I'm going to kick this to Miss Sarah Marsh and see what she feels about this quote, and then I'll let Nick weigh in, and I'll weigh in as well.
To me, this is, in one way, it could be about paying it forward. And I think about a great organization we have locally that came out of the Fayetteville Forward Initiative, and that's Compassion Fayetteville. And we have, I believe it's February, that's the month of compassion, where we encourage people to do a compassionate act in the community. And I think it's one of my favorite times in Fayetteville, because I think it exemplifies what is so great about our community, is that we are a group of caring people that want to do better for everyone. Recently, I was down in Little Rock, and I decided to walk to Dempsey Bakery from downtown to get some lunch. And while I was there, a woman experiencing homelessness came in, and she was visibly injured, and everyone in that restaurant ignored her, and she was just looking for some water and a telephone call so she could call her daughter and let her know she was okay. And, I saw this woman getting ignored by everyone, and I invited her over. I let her use my phone to call her daughter and bought her something to drink and just talked to her. And, that cost me $1.50, which it was an easy thing to do, but I could tell that this woman appreciated just being treated like a human.
Right.
And, it's just, she's a woman who was struggling, and we need to, instead of seeing a homeless person, see a person who's experiencing homelessness and reach out with compassion. And even if it's just saying hello, even if we're just, acknowledging each other's shared humanity, I think that that's an important thing that every one of us can do to enrich our community.
Absolutely. Great point. Nick?
Yeah. And it was a great quote, first of all. But you talked about Compassion Fayetteville, and I kind of want to bring up, too, that I feel like we have a city full of people that would, I think, live by this quote. There's so many, a lot of my work, I talk to a lot of organizations that do a lot of really good stuff. I mean, I think one of the best examples that exemplifies this quote is Tricycle Farms in the city. Don Bennett is like one of the most passionate, positive people I've ever met. Like, if you give him a moment of your time, he'll tell you all about how much he wants to just save the world, basically. Right. Yeah. And food insecurity is something he takes very, very seriously. He always brings it up. Just within like a mile radius of the farm, there's like, I think, a couple thousand people that are like in food insecure, just because where it is in town, it's about midtown Fayetteville by the Garland exit. And that's just one example. And then there's this other group of just these two people, this retired couple that what they do, it's Bridge of Peace Syria is their group, and they have a confidant over in Middle East in Syria. Syria, as we all know, is really bad right now. Right. And their whole thing is about getting like fuel, food, bread, clothes, whatever they can. They through donations, 100% of it, they give it to someone on the ground there who makes sure it gets to families that need it. Mm-hmm. And like, there's just two people in Fayetteville that are making a difference across the ocean. And I mean, that's awesome. And that's, they'll never be able, this people in Syria will never, I mean, they can tweet back at them, thank you. But like, that's, I don't think there's really any much they could do for them back here. Right. And that's not what it's about at all. It's about, you guys are hurting and we're going to do what we can to help you. And so I think it's cool. Like, we have a very entrepreneurial city, very startup can-do attitude, and you see it get into humanitarian efforts a lot too.
Right.
So it's I mean, it gives me pride to live here, to have like fellow neighbors that are like that, and it's very inspiring. And so it's they give us a good example for sure to live by. But yeah.
So, and that's a great point, Nick and Sarah, as well. For me, this quote means a lot. It's kind of the backbone and fabric of what I do and live by, and a lot of that is because I've been in a position where I needed the help, and you really don't realize it until you've been there a lot. You can always afford some kind of empathy in somebody's situation, but it doesn't. It's still nothing like feeling that, hopelessness, or the feeling that you don't know where your next meal is going to come from. Maybe not to that degree that I've been in, but definitely felt it. And so when I do get up each and every day, I know my situation could be a lot worse. So it helps me to realize that, hey, when I give the opportunity to do something for somebody, no matter if I know them or not, just do it. And like you said, Sarah, paying it forward is something that's very important to me, because I know that I'll get blessed later on down the road. But that's not why I did it. I did it because that in that moment I would have wanted somebody to do it for me. And that's more important to, the fabric of humanity. When you talk about humanitarian efforts, that's what it means, is to know that you're not going to get anything back, but you're going to be able to put your all and put your heart into it and your soul as well. And your life will be better for that. Trust me. So, this is our last segment, and the last portion of our third segment. We kind of discussed this presidential election, which we leave it to be last because we really think this is the reason why we wanted to do this. So, and I'll kick it to Miss Sarah and see what she thinks about this presidential election. Obviously, with it being diverse, which is a good thing, but more importantly is the divisiveness and the entertainment level of this election and the participants. Sarah?
Well, it's been an interesting election cycle, and I initially was a supporter of one of the other candidates, Bernie Sanders. So, I have a lot of great respect for Hillary Clinton. I am not a fan of all of her policies, and I worry that her priority agenda doesn't necessarily align with mine, but I think she's an incredibly well-qualified candidate, and I do intend to vote for her in the election. But I know a lot of people are disappointed in their options, whether it's from the left or from the right. And I think the most important message is don't stay home on Election Day. There are a lot of races and issues on your ballot, and especially the local races. The things that we do at the city council have a direct impact on your daily life. Please get informed and vote for us. So that your city represents your values. We've got, there were 7 initiatives on the ballot. I know some of them have been struck down as being unconstitutional, but we've got stuff for legalizing medical marijuana. There are a lot of important issues on the ballot. Don't be turned off by the national political scene of negativity, and look for the positives in your local races and get out and vote.
Absolutely. Nick?
Yeah. There's so much to talk about. I'm trying to think. Man, I'm blanking right now. I'm sorry.
It's okay. We come back to you. So if this presidential election, and Sarah hit the nail on the head, I really don't care who you vote for. This is not what this platform is for. This platform is for us to motivate people, and the younger people in particular. Obviously, which a great point that she made was her guy that she was going to go to bat with and for and go to war with was Bernie Sanders, and that was the populace for the young people's vote all from the beginning. And now that he's not on the ticket, those people are potentially going to stay home. We encourage you not to. We encourage you to still know the issues, research the issues, and then participate in the democratic process, because that's what being a good citizen is. But more importantly is knowing that we are eventually going to take the reins as millennials. We have to prepare ourselves and make sure that some of these laws and legislation don't go in and enacted until we know what they are, and also we acted upon them by participating in the process. So the future holds in the balance for us, and we're the precipice. I feel like in this presidential election it could be so much race baiting and things of that nature, obviously with the policing and some of the things, in the African American community that, I haven't been too happy with seeing. But that doesn't turn me away from participating. More importantly, it doesn't turn me away as lending love to my fellow person that doesn't look like me. And I think we got to look through past this flubber and the fodder of the national level when it comes to media and when it comes to the things that we read and Facebook and all these social media sites. We can't allow them to make us create dissent in our heart, and we got to know that this election is very critical to the future of America. We're potentially electing the first female to the highest office, which will really align the world, because you got some of the leading figures in the world with Theresa May, Angela Merkel, and some of the ladies that have become, the leaders of their countries. It would only just move the agenda for the woman even further, which I think is very healthy, not only for women, but for my daughter, So I really have a vested interest in potentially hiring the next lady to run our country. So that's what we're doing. We're basically interviewing these candidates, and some of them are more entertaining than others. And I know Miss Secretary Clinton doesn't come across as the nicest person, but I feel like she's done a lot of work, and her work stands for itself and on its own. So, Nick, did you have any more thoughts?
Yeah. I'm sorry about that. It's just
no worries.
it's just funneling kind of all the thoughts. And so, I mean, one thing that kind of I was thinking about while you were talking. Well, one thing important to me and what I'm looking for, what you said about our future and that we're going to inherit it, is climate change. And that's, you got one candidate that thinks it's a Chinese conspiracy to raise taxes, and the other one that's acknowledges it and has a plan for making it better from a scientific standpoint. That's something to me that kind of resonates with my values and what I for my future and for my children one day. That's the world. We're at a pretty scary point right now. They say it's like we either need to make drastic changes and maybe get out of this, or it'll be an exponential curve, and it's like maybe too late. At maybe about 10 years from now, if we keep going this steady course. Luckily, there's doing a lot of stuff globally. We're making a lot of changes. I think it's very becoming clear that that's a concern. But another thing too, like I told you earlier, I was having a talk with my parents, and they're definitely I come from a more conservative background. As I've left the nest, I've become a different way. And my parents talked a lot about the mainstream media, and it's all being, they have an agenda, and that they're skewing the facts, and it just seems like very it's disappointing, but it's really like I think it's almost toxic to buy into that kind of stuff, because I think there's something to be said. Of course, I as someone who works in the media, we're humans that run the media. It's not robots. It's not the president. It's just a bunch of people. The people have emotions, and it leads to everything they do in every kind of job. No one can do a job completely objectively. They're going to put themselves into the job. And that's kind of what we pay people for. We want their opinions and stuff like that. And obviously, journalism, you need to you state the facts so people can figure out how they feel about them. Right. And we've kind of turned into this now where it's identity politics and identity news, where you can find news outlets that match kind of how you feel, and then you can kind of create an echo chamber from there. And I worry whenever I hear people say, stuff like the mainstream media and stuff like that, that kind of stuff is forming, and it's unfortunate that your news now has to represent who you are and what your values are. It can't just be the news. Right. It has to buy into something that you're the way you see things, and I wish it wasn't like that, but I don't know. I think it's really what it is in this age of information and how easy it is to get connected and to see other people, is to take a step back and look at it for what it is. And if you're getting everything from one source, you should be able to check yourself. Right. Right. And it's as easy as just searching for another take on it, and kind of, I know that's work, and maybe people don't want to do that. Like, it's like, because Facebook news feeds have gotten crazy better in just the time I've been using the platform. And it also, they came out recently saying that they like limited conservative stuff. So that, I mean, that, yeah, there you go. There's already, I mean, it's like, yeah, trying to control the narrative. And obviously that's not cool. but I mean, the way the election is, a lot of people see it as maybe it's like, I think the people who did that saw it as like the just thing to do, because they're like, this is an election where this person represents all these horrible things, and we need to make sure whatever we can to make sure that doesn't happen. And it's, I mean, I don't know if they're wrong, but no, I'm kidding. But it's funny because it's now, there's so many things that of how we can reach our news now. But I think we've always had this kind of, I think it's foolish to think that now we have this controlled media. We've had, I mean, yellow journalism started like a war. I can't remember the specific one, but this was back like in the 30s or 20s. There's always been people in the media using it to further their views and to be thought leaders and stuff like that. And so I just think it's more of a responsibility for the reader to not take everything with a grain of salt, and also take multiple sources in. I think will only balance you out. So yeah.
Absolutely. Sarah, did you have anything else that you wanted to add to
Well,
wrap it up?
Regarding media, you know, as a person who's frequently in the news and oftentimes, well, not often, but sometimes doesn't recognize the, the stories that get reported about what actually happened, I do think that it is good to have a healthy skepticism of the news, and look for primary sources. We're lucky in Fayetteville. Here we have our Fayetteville Public Television, the Media Services Department of the city, where you can go and watch live or you can watch recordings of any city meeting or committee meeting, or anytime we interview people for boards and committees. We really believe strongly in a transparent government, so use that resource. You can get on our website and search for whatever ordinance or issue you were looking for and go directly to that point in the meeting on tape. So that is a really great feature. But again, you know, don't listen to your echo chamber on Facebook. And I think that goes with that, the social polarization. You know, don't unfriend your people who are supporting Trump. Like, engage them, talk to them, educate them, but also listen to what they have to say and realize, you know, see what matters to them. See if you can find common values and interests, and see them as a human, not just, you know, their identity politics. But again, looking at a variety of sources and looking to, you know, the government, whether it's C-SPAN or FPTV, and looking at those primary sources so that you can see what actually happened rather than someone's accounting of it.
Wow. And before we wrap this up, that's a great point on both of y'all. It's, for me, in media, it's like almost this glass ceiling effect, and we have to keep in mind that it's to decipher the important things we need to know, right? We need to know what those are, and a lot of us, the millennials, is so passive when you talk about technology, and y'all both alluded to it. It lends itself to have a chamber echo, and because of the vastness and the quickness of you are delivered news on a day-to-day basis, you just bombarded with different stuff, and I think that it distorts our ability and compromises our ability to say, hey, that's me, and that's what I'm, you know, gonna focus on. But it also enhances our ability, like you say, that the Trump supporters, it's a reason why they're upset. It's a reason why they feel the way that they do, and what is their reason? And that's one of the reasons why our framers did a two-party system and did it the way they did, also Green and Liberal Party as well. So that way there is some checks and balances. And for me, like I told Nick a while back, is, you know, I feel like journalism is the key, you know, journalists and journalism is the key to checks and balances on the government. If you really look at why they, you know, whistleblowers and people that have written, you know, pointed and pertinent and very important articles on some of the legislation that goes on, only until you get a public outcry is when you get some kind of movement. Obviously, you have lobbyists and people that actually get paid to do this, but the public and the people are the one who pushes the agenda. And I always knew that the framers had this in mind, and they knew that our social interactions will forge where the direction this country is going to go. And I feel like I have more hope in the people than I do our government. I think our people would will push where we need to go. And I think that's what, regardless of the dissent and the dissatisfaction, but at some point it's gonna pull itself. It retract and constricts, but it's gonna pull itself back to the middle. And that's what our system is set up to do. And it is set up as so much to, obviously, with some of these things that have been said, and we're gonna wrap this up, is the fabric of this Constitution and the fabric of the political system and the electorate is to have a seamless transition of power. And I think the undertone and undermining of that power is really on Constitution, in my opinion, with some of the things that they've, the Trump side has thrown around as far as the election being rigged. Mm-hmm. Now, we do face a amount of, scrutiny when you talk about the electronic ability that we have. So there are some issues there when you talk about safety and security of our votes. But more importantly is we can't have our GOP nominee saying that the election, because then that his followers will start feeling that, hey, something is wrong here. Why aren't we, they already feel like they're not giving a voice. But if you put more wind into that fire to say it's rigged, you'll start having issues at the precinct and on the ground, and you don't want people to feel, especially minorities and other people, to feel like they're being watched or unintended or unnecessary use of force at the polls that could potentially happen when you have the GOP nominee saying it's rigged, it's not fair. And I understand what his sentiment is, maybe because he sees that he's losing, but I don't think it's for his platform that he's using is adequately appropriate to say that this process is rigged, because it does undermine the fabric of the whole democratic process, where the transition of power has always been peaceful and seamless. So that's all we have today. I feel like it was a great discussion on some of the issues. Thank you so much, Ms. Marsh, for coming. She's running for City Council, Ward 1, C2. And thank you so much, Nick Brothers, my host. And I'm Carl Dunn. Thank you for joining us for Millennial Morning Brew, and we're signing off. Have a great day.